A new morning consult tracking poll of the Democratic race was released overnight, showing barely any movement from last week in the wide-ranging field. Joe Biden continues to lead with 39%, 20 points ahead of Senator Bernie Sanders at 19%. Senators Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren tied for a distant third at 8% each, narrowing those results down to the early contests in Ohio, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. Biden maintains a commanding 20-point lead over Sanders, 42% to 22%, with Warren moving up 3 points to third place with 9%. So, Willie, a lot going on. There are so many candidates, and I think we got one more this morning, and I don't think it ends there. I think we're going to have another one by week's end.
Yeah, we got Montana Governor Steve Bullock jumping in the race at the top of our show this morning. Also, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said yesterday he will announce his final decision about a potential run for president this week.
You're considering a presidential run. Nearly 2 dozen people are running. A lot of them straight white male, fitting your profile. Why run for president? Why consider it, given the profile of the party?
I don't think it makes sense to speak to that until I've come to a decision. I've been talking to my family. We will make a final decision this week, and we'll announce it this week. But until I've come to that decision, I don't think it makes sense to speak to that.
Okay, so Gene Robinson, we expect this announcement on Thursday. I have a question. It's not necessarily about Bill de Blasio, but it might be. We can ask him on Thursday. But some of these candidates have no shot, okay? Yeah. Right? I mean, is that okay to say, even in this climate, where anything could happen? I mean, we saw last time. And is that it? So what are they running on? Because, by the way, some of them could be doing, work for America in the Senate, and that is, you could argue, as important in the future for Democrats. But what's the point? Is it narcissism? Is it, anything could happen because Trump happened, so I'm going to just throw my hat in there? Like, they know they have no shot, right?
They must know. First of all, I have a question.
What is it then?
Well, my question, first of all, is why do I never get to slow jam the news? I could slow jam the news.
I never asked either.
Come on. Okay, so ask Fallon.
I think Joe would be amazing slow jammer, too, with the whole musical. I mean, so. But, no, it's so fun.
To your point, Mika, some of them have no chance. But, if you look, what's the downside to them? They become better known. They get book deals. They maybe get to.
So it's a PR thing?
To move up. It's a branding exercise, I think, for some of them, frankly. Don't underestimate the ability of politicians at every level to delude themselves and to think that they are the salvation of the nation and the world, and they are the chosen one, and they need to be in this. But with 22 and 23 candidates, however many, 2 dozen candidates, and with a handful clearly now sort of distancing themselves from the field, and others polling at zero. I mean, polling at negligible levels. They're not going to be able to sustain this for very long. It's expensive to run for president, and they're not going to get any money, and they're going to have to drop out. And I think most of them will feel that they're better off than they are where they started. But to your other question, why some of these people should be running for Senate? There's a possibility that he's a good guy, but John Hickenlooper, who's not polling well in Colorado, he could take on Cory Gardner in a Senate race, and he could win. He'd have a good chance of doing it. The Democrats' chance of taking the Senate may be, I hate to say squandered, but it's certainly lessened by the fact that some really potentially outstanding Senate candidates are either running for president or sitting on the sidelines.
Willie, they're squandering the Senate, but there's also the fact that, some of these names don't even come up, so it's not a branding exercise. It's not. You're not building your name. You're getting nothing out of it, because if you're one of 2, 3, 4, or 5, that's a branding exercise because you're part of the conversation. But when you're number 25, and you don't even get brought up in the what is going on? Like, why would anybody enter the race as a Democrat right now?
Well, I think for most people in America who watch this, the race has not yet begun. It has for us, of course, as we watch. But the debates next month on MSNBC, all of these people will get a chance to have a moment, and maybe they will pop in the poll a little bit, and then the road begins from there. I think the debate really is the first time the country will stop and watch and see all these candidates. And Gene, I want to go back to your part of the country, South Carolina, as we look at those Biden polls. He's up big nationally, of course, but when you look in those early states, the South Carolina numbers in particular were eye-popping this week, where he's up by 31 points overall against Bernie Sanders. And among black voters, Gene, he's up by 43 points in South Carolina.
Yeah, and those kinds of numbers, we'll see if they hold, whatever, but potentially can be decisive. You have to do well among with African American voters if you hope to win the Democratic nomination for president. And so far, Joe Biden is doing much better than anybody else. South Carolina is the first test of African American support after Iowa and New Hampshire, where there are very few black people. And if Biden, if he makes that sort of showing, he'll be very, very difficult to beat. I know it's early days and it's Joe Biden, so anything can happen, but that's a very significant factor in his lead right now.
Anyone entering the race right now, the question I will be asking is, with so many candidates, what is so specific about you that you feel that you should be chosen among all these candidates? What makes you so different from all of them? And there has to be an answer or get out, because at this point we're getting to levels that are ridiculous. Coming up, from the trade war with China to escalating tensions with Iran and North Korea's continued missile tests. We have a lot to talk about with Richard Haass and Ambassador Wendy Sherman. That's next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.